Betts is going to get a free kick in the pocket that he has made his own. He's got so many tricks here. It'll be the left foot. What a way to start the season.
Spills to McGovern, got to be clean, got some traction on the ball, bend, gone. What about that? What about
It's half a chance, worked underneath by Haynes and Lynch and Tomlinson and McGovern. Ball in dispute, Lynch, terrific tackle by Shaw up the front. Betts, still with Eddie, over the top to McGovern, back to Betts, Betts goes bang. Oh, don't you love him? Don't you love him?
And welcome everybody to the AFL Crowcast for another Tuesday Night Live. And that is an absolute finals quality intro there from Phoenix. Good on you, mate. How good was that?
It was all right.
Oh, come on. It was sensational, Fiend. You've done a fantastic job there. Welcome, everybody. Great to have you all along with us. It is a massive, massive podcast tonight. Of course, it's a finals time. It's that time when we get very, very excited. In particular, Essential Crows fans get very, very excited because the first time for the season we get a reserve seat and we don't have to get to the game 3 hours before the start and we don't have to sit there for 2 hours until play starts. So Essential Crows members out there, big shout out. Very, very exciting time for us. Joining us tonight on the panel, as always, is Nicky Macker and Fiend. Guys, how are you, and are you excited?
Yep, I'm excited. All right. Yeah, it was a good. It was a good beginning by Phoenix. Although I did wonder if it was going to sort of go for the whole show and then we'd say goodbye.
Well, it would have made more sense than anything you might say tonight, Macker.
Oh, Phoenix, you're at it already, mate. You're at it already.
I was just going to say that it just seems like Macca and I, we sound so enthused, don't we?
All right, what's going on? Come on, fire up.
You can always tell the people that have had their reserve seats all year because it's not a big it's not a big deal for them on Thursday night, but for me, it's a massive deal. So I'm excited. Look, just a massive amount to get through tonight. There's just a ton of things that have been happening in the AFL, even though it's been bye week. And, of course, we have the big final on Thursday night. So to get us away without further ado, we will push on to Nicky's news.
Righto. Well, we kind of had a bit of... Now he brings it in.
I did that on purpose, Nicky, because I wanted you to talk over it.
Oh, you're a bastard. Yeah, see, Scorpus has told you off. It's probably a bit loud in the chat. It was kind of weird having this bye week, and then you had the other teams who aren't involved at all trying to make it all about them. So we had some interesting information coming out regarding Collingwood, Maine, Buckley being reappointed, him basically saying, oh, it was nothing to do with me getting Maine over here. Maine's dad was slagging him off on Twitter, saying, yeah, it was, but you only played him for 3 games. So it was like, oh, Collingwood, shut up. You're irrelevant at the moment. But it will be interesting to see if they will try and get rid of him, even though he's got a 3-year contract.
I wouldn't mind betting they wind him up and take the hit, to be honest.
Well, there was talk about they were going to meet with him about talking about a settlement, so that would indicate what you just said is right.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. There's obviously a bit of a disconnect there, and I reckon they cop the hit, take the what would it be, 1.5 off their cap for the year.
Yeah,
doesn't look like they're getting lever, so...
well, that'd be over 2 years, so that...
No, 1.5 in total.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, because he's 500 for... He's got, 3 left at 500, so that's 1.5, so...
Whoever recruited him, I'm quite seriously, and paying $500,000 for that guy for 4 years, must have been drunk at the time, I reckon.
Well, the reports are
Gubby Allen.
Yeah, the reports are that Buckley was quite happy to have him, but just about fell over when he heard what the deal was going to be. Like, Buckley green-lighted the trade, but thought it'd be 350 for a couple of years or something. And when he had 500 for 4 or whatever it was, he just about died.
Yeah, well, he had a very ordinary year before he came across. So if there was another deal and he was steak knives, you would have said okay. But as you said, on 350 or something like that, not half a mil.
Sorry, I can't get too enthused about this story. I'd put this on the minute kind of level of AFL stories around at the moment. To be perfectly honest, Chris Mayne, I mean, it's just a nothing. It's just it was a overpriced player, and they've balls that up really. Anything else, Nikki?
Well, the really interesting one was to do with Glenn Archer. Now, are you guys aware of this particular story?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, he jumped a fence and punched a boundary umpire in an under-15s game, I think it was, where his son was playing. Now, the boundary umpire, like in most clubland, it's somebody from the club that's doing it because you can't afford to pay for the full set of umpires, so you put some of, you get some family members or what in. That boundary umpire, interestingly, has actually been banned by the league because he, we don't quite know the full story from a couple of things that I've read, but it appears that he's managed to either push or touch a player on that team. Archer's then jumped the fence and punched him. He's now gone to court and, of course, been charged and found guilty of assault. And there's been a few questions raised as to, he's actually an AFL board member. So what's the AFL going to do about this?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious, really. I mean, with the conviction and that behaviour, he would have to resign from the board, in my opinion.
He's a favourite son of the AFL, and that being the case, nothing will happen, and you can get set on that any money you like.
Yeah, and he's really shitty that the full story didn't come out in the court case. But he has contended that he did hit a bloke and he shouldn't have jumped the fence.
Yeah, the thing is, though, initially Archer denied hitting him, so his story's changed a couple of times as well. And he needs to be stood down, even if it's only temporarily. But the AFL, as usual, they ignore it when they don't need to address it.
Now, and this is likely to feature a little bit later in the Cockwomble, because I think this just takes the cake. So we've got some interesting things going on up at the Gold Coast. Once again, another team out of the finals, but wanting to make it all about them. So Ablett's only playing 14 games has managed to win their best and fairest. There was some talk that he possibly got votes in games he shouldn't have.
Rigged, I'd say.
I think he got votes in games he didn't actually play.
Yeah, it was something ridiculous like that. Go, well done, Gold Coast. Mark Evans knows how to rig the system. And you've got Chris Scott, who's making noises of, it's really hard. It's going to be really hard. No, it's going to be impossible. No. We're not going for Gary. We're not going for Gary because he's contracted and all. No. And now frickin' Gillen has come out today and gone, oh, no, if Tom Lynch wants to sign on for, longer, we'll give him an extra $500K as an ambassador.
This to me is one of, if not the biggest stories, news stories from the AFL this week. This is nothing other than salary cap tampering. It is an absolute disgrace by the AFL that they would put it. They've tried to qualify it by saying, they won't, it won't be guaranteed up. We won't just offer it out there. It's something that we'll look at putting in once he's signed. Well, big deal, weasel words. The fact of the matter is that they're going in and lumping a whole lot of money on his salary. And how does that work for anybody else? Do we get that money for Lever? No, of course not. It is nothing more than salary cap tampering, and it is absolutely disgraceful.
What is their justification for doing it, though?
Well, because obviously it would hurt that franchise more if Lynch decided to leave. So, and considering there's no concessions anymore, cap concessions, the only other way that AFL can tamper with the whole system and get the result that they want, because, of course, as we all know, they're outcome focused, they slapped this ambassadorial number on there, which is the same one that they gave Carmichael Hunt and Izzy Folau when they came over. But obviously that had some application considering they were coming from other codes. This guy's just a player.
That's disgusting.
And he's their captain.
So how can we claim an equalised competition, which we all know it's not, but they bang on about the key pillars of equalisation being the draft and the salary cap. This is cap cheating. That's all it is.
Yep.
There's nothing more, nothing less.
Open cheating, Peter.
Yeah, absolutely condoned by the AFL, actually being created by the AFL. I mean, what they've done is they've realised they've got a massive issue up on the Gold Coast, and they're very likely they are going to lose Ablett, who's kind of like their star that they have pushed around because he was like the best player in the league, and he's gone up here to play for you guys. Well, he plays when he wants to, when he doesn't want to get on a plane.
Quite frankly, though, I'm sick of this Ablett story. In my opinion, Gold Coast should play really hard ball with it, and there's been talk that theoretically they've demanded a player and that Geelong pay the salary for this player. Well, Abbott's been front end loaded with his salary, got $1.5 million in the first year, and this weasel then wants to go down to Geelong, and just so he can play with the boys and his mates again down there. And I just wouldn't. Why should the Gold Coast release him so that he can play down at Geelong and make them stronger? Why should he make a competitor stronger?
Yeah,
and
it's the exact same argument.
For Gibbs. Is that what you're going to say, mate?
Yeah, exactly the same argument as they used for Gibbs. That Carlton front-ended him, and therefore he owes them a bit back.
And you can bet with this, the VFL media will be all over the emotion of Gaz coming home, and there'll be no carrying on about, well, how good is it that clubs are now making players stick to their contracts like there was like Gibbs.
Correct. That's what I'm getting at, Pete. All the talk on the TV shows and that, but they're all coming from Victoria. No, Wink, he'll be coming back. That's Butte, and there's no talk about being fair to Gold Coast or anything like that.
But it's bloody disgraceful.
I do think though that there is a positive that the AFL's created out of this, that they've stuffed it up. They're trying to engineer this nice little good luck story of him coming back. I do think that Mark Evans being up there is where they're getting a bit of the posturing from, because he is quite strong.
No,
and
they're working together, Nikki. He's been installed by the AFL, and
he
Gillen and Evans would be working this situation for the best outcome for the AFL and for Gold Coast. And it's no coincidence that this ambassadorial thing's come up for Lynch.
And you've also got talk of Hodge all of a sudden not being retired and having a coaching role, but that was from a fairly good source. That was actually Hodge's management trying to get a bit more money out of the media organisations that are vying for his services. And he never actually had he never actually had any intention, according to someone in the know. No, but what I was kind of getting at was, whilst I know that they installed him up there and he will seemingly be colluding on behalf of the AFL, there's nobody in the AFL that is actually as strong as Mark Evans. So he'll be able to work Gillen. Gillen is not a smart bunny. We know that.
Oh, yes, he is. You can't say he's not a smart bunny. You can't say he's not a smart bunny. He's manufactured. He got the AFL through that Essendon saga, and we can sit here and criticise the AFL as much as we like, but at the end of the day, the AFL got the least worst outcome that they could have possibly got out of that situation. He's manufactured the last 2 media rights deals. He's not a dumb person, Gil. We might not agree with what he's trying to do, but that doesn't make him dumb. That just makes him a little divisive. And him and Evans will be working this situation pretty hard to get another feel-good outcome for the AFL.
Speaking of feel-good, are we all happy to move along from the Gold Coast?
I was going to say, do we want to raise the All Australia?
No, that was well done. You read my mind. That was exactly what I was trying to move towards.
We don't even have a run sheet, and you guys are just spot on tonight.
You're just knocking it out of the park.
This
Nikki,
is what
tonight.
happens when you let us listen to the music.
Oh,
That's right. We all know where we're at. So the All Australian Awards.
That's pretty hard on an individual, but who's going to have to live with that?
I hope you heard that.
Was that aimed at the selectors who bloody put Rance in as captain? Because I agree with Blighty then.
I just cannot believe. I have to get this off my chest because when it all happened, I was just so appalled by the All Australian selection and the side, and the absolute clear bias and pandering to everything Essendon and ex-Essendon drug cheats. Because you had
Pete,
five players there that were either Essendon players or ex-Essendon drug cheats.
And no. But you missed what also they did as part of that was, they took a year off of football, and that's kind of reinvigorated them, and that's helped them. They've come back and they're playing their best ever because they took a year off. No, they're drug cheats. It wasn't their choice to do it.
Every 50-50 call in whatever position that they are up for goes to either an Essendon player or an ex-drug cheat.
Yeah, and then you chuck in Selwood's inclusion over a guy like JPK, who was absolutely stiff not only be in the team, but also like Kennedy was touted as captain in many circles, and I wouldn't have been disappointed with that. And he couldn't even make the final 22 for Christ's sakes.
Absolutely ridiculous.
He stole every line I had up there, Phoenix, for that one. I totally agree with everything you said there. I mean, and also for Rance's captain, what a joke. I mean, he runs around like they say he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And look, he's a good player, but I think he's an irresponsible backman at times because he runs all over the place, and and when you look at, he gets a lot of goals kicked at him for the year. And anyway, that's only my opinion.
Also, you know, I mean, I know that we had this discussion last week that you didn't think that Sloane should make it. Particularly when you're putting Selwood in there, but I absolutely thought that he was ahead of him and he should have made it. He was third in the coaches' votes.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. If Selwood makes it, Sloane makes it.
And all they did is they just bought into this media line that, you know, Sloane had a poor season because he was tagged. You know, I mean, yes, he had some quiet games, but he had some stellar games as well. And
then neglecting... on that point there, Pete, they were also neglecting that Selwood, when he was tagged, was even less efficient than what Sloane was.
Very true.
And and the award ceremony themselves, and they just parade these galahs out onto the stage, and cackle on, and you get about 2 minutes with the actual players themselves, and the rest of the time you got to sit there with idiots like Richardson and Frawley and Darcy and all these clowns with smug smirks on their face. Just absolutely, it was just an absolute abomination. The whole ceremony was, and ridiculous, pathetic questions thrown up, and the whole thing was just an abomination, and including the selection. I was disgusted by the whole thing.
Can't argue with you, Pete. I think you're on the money.
Yep.
And the question that for the panel now is that really, what is the credibility of the All Australian Awards? When you look at the people that are on selection, and you tell me, what is the credibility of the awards?
Well, there's one definitely on there I would actually listen to in terms of football, and that's actually Warren Treadray.
He's biased too.
He's actually I would happily listen to him talk about football, though.
I would too. For 30 seconds.
He gave a very, very good wrap up of Matty Crouch.
Yes.
Treaders. He spoke very, very well in respect of Matt Crouch, but then I thought he let himself down a few days later when he put all his eggs in the SPP bucket for the Rising Star.
Exactly.
Which not coincidentally went to another Essendon player. Oh, what a feel good story that is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Their first round draft pick that they shouldn't have bloody had.
And actually, the Rising Star was a joke too, because I thought the Hawthorn boy Burton should have won that, and hands down, I thought.
Oh no, McGrath was a deserving winner of that. It could have gone either way. I don't think Powell Pepper was in the frame after halfway through the season, but I had no dramas with McGrath winning it. He's put together a pretty good first season.
Good footballer, Fiend, absolutely agree. But the point being is that every 50-50 call throughout these award ceremonies, where there was an Essendon player involved, goes to an Essendon player.
Well, I don't disagree with that. They could have just
as easily given it to Burton. Burton was deserving as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I have less problem with the Rising Star than I do with the All-Australian. I think the All-Australian's actually gone the way of a lot of things, a lot of institutions of VFL/AFL football, in that it's become a little bit of a circus. And while we're throwing around premature cockwombles, that whole coverage by Foxtel.
Yeah. That was going to feature.
Oh, sorry, I won't steal your thunder then, Nikki. But the whole thing was a joke.
I'll let you have a go, because there were certain comments that were made. I was just like, "Oh, you dipshits."
Well, I don't. If you're presenting the All-Australian team, why do you have a panel critiquing the selection? That is the most irrespective.
Whilst the player is standing there saying, "Oh, he shouldn't have probably been in there," instead of this bloke.
Irrespective of whether you agree with the selection or not, once the selections have been made, it's a ceremony. It's not a panel show. It's a ceremony. And to have people there like Mark bloody Pisshead Robinson critiquing selections on the night at the time, have your critique before or after the show. Don't have it during the ceremony. That's disgusting in my view.
Oh, and he comes up with questions, to Richo or whatever idiot that they have on the selection panel, saying, "Oh, well, now, why did you pick that player? Why did you pick player A? Why didn't you pick player B?" Then cue 2-minute pathetic explanation. "Oh, knowing nod, yeah, right, okay, Jared. Well, that's obviously why they've gone for player. Oh, okay, well, that's okay." It was just cringeworthy.
Yeah, it was terrible. I couldn't watch it.
I actually flicked off it, to be honest.
I kind of kept turning the sound off once they started talking about particular players, and I thought, I know exactly what they're going to raise. No, I don't need to listen to that.
Another total wank session, anyhow. That's my opinion.
Anyway, let's move on from the stupid All-Australian.
Sorry, moving on.
Come on, host. Come on, Peter.
Yeah. Well, just quickly on there, congratulations to Laird and Crouchy. Very well deserved.
Who, what?
Laird and Crouchy, though. Very well deserved they were in there.
Yeah, go on. See, I'm just going crazy now that you can hear all these effects.
All the toys
You've missed it, haven't you?
Phoenix might get a bloody cock one nomination.
He's got all the toys tonight.
Quite, Macca.
Okay, I'm going to, just as we tail off with the news, I'm just going to drop a little bit of news in there in relation to our very, very own Adelaide Crows. I came across some information probably about 2 weeks ago and had it firmed up a little bit this week, just in relation to...
Pete's been back home. Had it firmed up a bit.
Dear me.
Oh, stop it.
A player that we are evidently will be chasing in this trade period will be North Melbourne's Ben Cunnington. Is a player that will be high on our shopping list, currently contracted to North, but word is that they've obviously missed out on Martin and they will miss out on Kelly, and they may well be looking to offload some for them bigger name players to try and get themselves into some early parts of the draft. So may well be a doable deal, and I've got the info that that's a player that we're going to strongly be looking at to bring over and bolster the midfield for 2018.
You know what? You know why I like this? Because Scorpus really doesn't. He's just gone in the chat.
I think you've got to be like we were talking about this off air, and just to kick this off, if we just have a little bit of discussion on what we think of this, but if we are going for a player like this, I think we all like to think that we're out there chasing the Kellys and the Dustin Martins of the world, but the reality is that these players you've got to look at players that are actually prepared to come to Adelaide and remove themselves from the Melbourne spotlight. So, you've got to look at, I guess, what are realistic targets. Now, Cunnington is a solid A-grade midfielder. He's had a very, very good season this year. He's in the right age profile. He's 26 years old. He will come at a reasonable cost, both financially and also in terms of his trade cost. And he is a player that we may well be able to entice over here. He's not in that, sexy sort of player mould, who is, in the living the high life in Melbourne. And so you've got to be realistic about who we can get over. And he is a player that will walk straight into our best 22 without question. Well,
he's a hard noser and he's a blue collar worker, I reckon. He is a hard worker. There's no doubt about that. And he's an in and under player. What would you think you'd have to pay to get him across?
He's contracted, so that raises a little bit of difficulty.
It all depends whether Northbourne want to keep him or not. And if they want to keep him, obviously, that's going to make it...
If they want to keep him, I mean, that's not going to happen. I think that we've got to look at it from the point of view that they may well be looking to, saying to players, look, we're going full rebuild here.
We've got a young midfielder they can have. Looks a bit like him. His name's Dean Gore.
Yeah, funny. It'd have to be a later first, wouldn't you think?
I wouldn't pay. I wouldn't be giving a first for him.
Something around about the 17, 18, 19, somewhere around there.
Is this indicative of us maybe going cool on Bryce Gibbs?
No. I think that that may well be in our calculations. Well, don't forget, it will take with Cunnington. It'll take a little bit to get it across the line. So, I mean, we're talking about sort of irons in the fire, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think that would stop us from trying to get a deal done with Gibbs at all. I think we'll probably still try and pursue that, but I don't have solid information on that. The only solid info I had is on Cunnington.
The only reason I ask is because Cunnington and Gibbs are probably similar players in terms of cost, and it would involve us pretty much trading out of the first round and probably the second round to get them both. So
yes, that'd definitely be right.
But if you put those two guys in our midfield next year, I mean, geez, it makes it pretty solid.
I don't disagree, and I'm not against it in theory, but we have been prone to take our first round to the draft more often than not, and we had the opportunity to spend it last season and didn't. So it'd be a change in tack by the club to basically trade out of the first couple of rounds.
Not necessarily, because Lever goes, and there's every indication that he will go. He's going to at least net a first.
Yeah, well, there's your 2 first round picks, and you probably get a high first rounder for Lever, you would think. So do you want to spend that on the Cunningham? Yeah, interesting.
No,
anyway,
they wouldn't spend it. I'd reckon they'd look at what they're going to get. I reckon they'll trade out Charlie Cameron. I reckon they'll send something up to Brisbane with Charlie and get pick 18, somewhere around there.
Yeah,
that might be what they'd use for Cunnington, or they might use that for Gibbs. Then we've probably got pick 17 or 18 ourselves, maybe, or 16, depending on how we go. They may use that for Cunnington. They still might have a good high draft pick available in a good draft next year from Lever.
Yep,
I think that's how it would be done.
Yep. I forgot about the Cameron thing.
For thought.
We ready to talk about the game?
Yep, all good to go. Let's go.
I don't know what you had in mind, but here we stand on opposing sides. Let's go to war. Let's go to war!
There you go, just a little bit of fire up music for you, Pete.
Oh, yeah, absolutely caning it tonight, mate.
I know.
The effects are just brilliant. So, all right, massive game on Thursday night. Of course, it is the first qualifying final. It is the Crows up against GWS, and promises to be a huge game. We have almost a sellout crowd. I see some, strangely enough, some tickets were released today. I was told by the Adelaide Football Club that there were some returns from some of the AFL clubs and the AFL themselves, probably sponsors and player requests and all the rest of it. They've so there were a few more tickets floating around this afternoon, but imagine that it will be formally a sellout, and so it should be a huge night on Thursday night. Weather conditions are going to be similar to what they've been all week. I think there's going to be a chance of a shower, pretty blustery. Guys, I think that may those conditions may well suit us.
Well, certainly we've performed very well this year when we played in games with conditions like that. In fact, it's amazed me the skill we've actually shown when we've been playing in conditions like that.
Well, the only game we haven't, Macca, and the one that concerns me is the first quarter against Sydney, where that was the worst of the conditions that night, and under the higher pressure of the Swans inside mids, we became quite sloppy with our ball handling. So, yes, we do play well in windy conditions, but we're going to have to be nice and tight early on because we don't want to start giving the ball away early.
You're right about the Sydney game, but was that due to the conditions or was that due to the intense pressure that Sydney was putting on? Because I thought their pressure again in those early minutes was amazing, and some of our blokes I think panicked just a little bit.
Well, that's my point. We're playing a final. The pressure is going to be up, Macca.
It'll be on for young and old, no doubt. I reckon. Let's just unpack this from the start and look at who were ins and outs. Obviously, we're going to have Talia and Walker come back in, and I suspect Greenwood as well. So I certainly hope that they would be recalling Greenwood. Sloane, a possible out. Who else would you think would be coming out of that side? Probably Keith. And who else?
The second one's an interesting one, Pete. There's probably a couple to choose from. I don't know. Do you stick with Wayne Miller, do you? Or do you stick with Charlie Cameron? Or
Miller goes.
And see, as we said after the West Coast game, in the performance that Seeds put in there, he deserves. He put as much forward as he could to say, "Hey, I deserve to actually play in that first final."
Well, the way I see it is that Hardigan comes in and he takes Keith's place, and then Miller came in just for that particular game. I see he goes out. Greenwood resumes his spot. So it just comes down to the. Sorry,
then you've got to make room for Walker. So there's three. There's got to be there's at least 3 ins. So Walker, Greenwood, and Talia. So obviously, if we switch out Keith for Talia, I think that is pretty clear. Happy to agree that we switch out Miller for Greenwood, and we're setting aside Sloane at the moment, and that then takes us to who comes out for Taylor Walker.
Yeah, exactly, and
see, Miller actually was the in for Walker.
Doesn't matter how you carve them up, Nicky. There's going to be 3 in and 2 out. 3 out, sorry. We've only got 2 so far, so we've got to come up with another one.
Well, it's probably Cameron or Rory Atkins for mine.
If it was on pure form, it would be Rory Atkins because he's been very disappointing the last few weeks in totality. He's had perhaps one good game in the last five weeks or so. And Seaman certainly played better than him in the last game. I just have a feeling, though, the selectors are going to stick with the side that basically played all year, and that I think that Atkins will probably play and the Siege might be the unlucky one.
I think that's the rationale, mate, that I would think, only because selection has shown itself to be very, very conservative, and I think that Seed would be desperately unlucky. He carried the ball 602 metres, if you don't mind, against West Coast Eagles. It was an extraordinary effort.
Yeah, team high.
And it was. I think if I remember looking, it was league high for round 23 as well. So it was a very, very good effort, and he's been in sparkling form in the twos, and translated that immediately into the ones as well. So he's in ripper form and would be very, very stiff to miss out, I think. But Macca, I think that you've hit on the head there. Is that it's very, very hard to see them changing the setup that they've had all year.
Well, the one thing in Cameron's favour is that the ball's going to be on the deck quite a bit, you'd imagine, which brings him into play. But it doesn't help Rat's cause, I don't think. So it's going to be... they play slightly different roles, although Seaman can push up onto a wing. Look, I probably agree with you, Pete, but if I was a selector, I'd probably pick Seedsman. But what I think they'll do is probably stick with Atkins and have Seedsman as emergency.
Yeah, I think Atkins will make it, but with a very, very stern talking to before the game as to how close he was to losing his spot.
I just kind of want to pull up Vay Magic on something that he's just said in the chat. That he talked about Seed's lack of hardness worries him. Go and watch Seedsman since he actually came to our club. He does not have a lack of hardness. He's had some absolutely ripping tackles, and he did in the game against West Coast as well. We heard all about this from Collingwood supporters, that he doesn't like to tackle, he has a lack of hardness. I've yet to see that from him in the twos in the SNFL, and when he's played for us in our top side. It's something he actually does have. It's just this feeling that people have because they've heard Collingwood supporters say it.
No, actually, what happened, Nicky, with Collingwood, why he fell out of favour, and I used to watch him pretty closely because I always thought that he was a very good player, but he had a very, very dark day where he didn't seem to try very hard and he didn't go very hard for the ball, and he got taken off by Buckley at half time and not put back on the game on the field again, and I don't think he played again for the A's all year. So he did play one very soft game then, but I can't say that I've seen that while he's been playing with us.
Put it this way, if it's a question of hardness between Seedsman and Atkins,
Seed wins.
You know, not that I think Rory's improved that side of his game.
Yeah,
but
he has.
But it's certainly not a differentiating factor between him and Seed. And I think at the moment, well, judging on last week's performance, we get far more value for disposals from Seedsman than we do from Atkins. So it's going to be very interesting, that last spot, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think Miller and Keith are pretty much set, and I think that third spot could be any one of three players, I think, that could take that spot. So very, very difficult to say. And look, I think we'll just assume that Sloane's going to play. He'd probably only be 50-50 at best. I don't know if anybody's got any info or heard anything or seen anything, but I would say at best he's 50-50, but you'd back him in, I think.
I think he'll play, but if he doesn't, I think then that probably Seedsman comes in then.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, is it... I'd heard that he's had his medical clearance from the docs and he just has to get through training tomorrow.
Oh, well, there you go.
There, he'll be playing then.
Well, the word is that there's no damage that can be done. It's purely a matter of whether he can tolerate the pain, and because it's just internal healing. But he's not going to do any damage as such. So there's no health risk.
And just as you say that, a big shout out to Phil, Greg Laganis, Davis.
I was going to mention that. We're on the... I like that. This is weird, Pete. We're on the same wavelength tonight.
I know. I'll have to go back and check my material next week. But sorry, Nicky.
That's funny.
I just have to... No, Mr. Laganis himself, Phil Davis, getting out there and saying that they're going to test out Rory Sloane. I tell you what a classic line from, I'd say, arguably the biggest girls' players playing for football at the moment.
Pathetic effort. That's pretty hard on an individual, but he's going to have to live with that.
And I reckon he's got to live with the fact that the fact that he's had two guys suspended this year through his Laganis efforts. But anyway,
that's right.
Hopefully we'll see Sloaney back. Fane, what do you think of? You got any ideas on matchups and anything you want to input there?
No. No, look, I think...
Okay, moving along.
No. There's a couple of... Luke Brown is going to have a really important job on Toby Green, I think. I think Toby Green's a bit of a wild card for them. And with the ball on the deck, I think he's just as dangerous for the Giants as Eddie is for us. And he might have the biggest job of the night.
Green's had an outstanding year, apart from the number of reports as well. But he's been an excellent player, and as you say, he's a very, very dangerous player and dangerous around goals and setting up goals. So, but I looked up the records. Every time Brown's played on him, he's kept him pretty quiet.
Yep, and a lot will depend, obviously, and PJ's brought this up in the chat. There's been a bit of talk about whether they go all tools or whether they leave Lob out again. Looking at the weather, I would suggest that Lob might sit out.
If they play Lob, in my opinion, that would be a big mistake.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they can afford to have that amount of height in the forward lines.
Tom Scully is another player that worries me, guys, and I'm not sure that we've got any suitable matchup for him. He's just his pace through the and the width that he uses on the ground is just very, very damaging. And he is a very, very good player, and I'm just not sure that we've got a suitable matchup to go with his pace.
Yeah, a damn good player. Kelly is the star, of course, and he's a brilliant player, Kelly. And even if you put a tag on Kelly, he'll still get a lot of possessions. And I think Scully thrives on this a bit because Kelly gets the attention, and if you don't watch Scully as well, he can certainly break the lines with the ball. He's got a lot of pace, and he just loves to run with it.
Oh, I don't think we'll see too many tags, Macca. I could be wrong, but we tend to beat the Giants basically from our rebound and their lack of defensive efforts and defensive running. And I don't think we'll move too far away from the blueprint this Thursday. I think we match them okay in the midfield department, and I think our strength is our ability to run both ways. And I can't see us, sacrificing a Riley Knight onto a Scully or a Kelly and losing that bite up forward.
I think if it's anyone, it'll be Dougie playing a cooler role. So in terms of, it's not a hard tag, which is kind of what we do more with Riley Knight, but he'll follow him around, he'll make him accountable, he'll make him very uncomfortable, but he's got that better ability to break away.
Yeah, I think that's more likely what will happen, and because I think you're wasting your time and you virtually do a player in if you try and put a hard tag onto Kelly, because he still gets, even with a hard tag, he gets 20-odd positions because he just doesn't stop moving, and it's very, very hard to tag a bloke that won't stand still.
Very good point, Macca. One of the other players that is very concerning, and he didn't play in round one against us, and that is their little midfield bull in Caniglio. He is a very, very in and under, hard at it player. I think they really missed him in the first half of the year, and he has gradually got himself back to fitness and getting in some form, gets a lot of the ball, and wins quite a bit of contested ball as well. So he'll be another player we need to watch.
Absolute quality player. He's one of the best midfielders in the comp when he's absolutely right. And you're right there, Pete. We're up against a very good midfield here.
Doesn't run both ways apparently, this midfield, but so we hear from Big JJ.
Well, it doesn't.
Yeah.
No, it
and
wasn't
I
just
don't know
JJ.
Yeah, but I don't know why JJ comes out and says that shit. Honestly, why do you come out and point out what you feel is an opposition's weakness? I don't understand that. Let the pundits analyse, and you just go out and play your game.
Yeah, but I think.
But it's been said all year. He's not the first one to say it.
He's
that's
the first
thing that
player
got
to
me.
say it.
Yeah, Nicky stole my line. That's where I was going to. It's not like it's news, Phoenix. I mean,
Yeah, but you just don't say it as an opposition player. You just don't say it. You don't talk about the opposition. You talk about what you're going to do, because comments about the opposition will inevitably come back to bite you on the arse. And the first thing that I'd do if I was Leon Cameron is play that bloody thing on loop in the bloody warm-ups, just to remind his players that the opposition don't think you can two-way run, and you watch them put in a bit of effort as a result.
Well,
Yeah, but it won't last long because they don't quite know how to do it.
Well, Wayne Carey made a very similar point to the one that you just made. I think he had something pathetic like saying that, and that that'll fire him up. Well, I'm with Nicky. That'll last 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, I'd just rather our players concentrate on what they're going to do and focus on what they're going to do, and let GWS, fall on their own sword if that's what they're going to do. I don't like players coming out and making calls on oppositions 2 days before the game, particularly in a final. If you've identified a weakness, that's fine, and it doesn't matter whether the media has pointed it out. If you've identified a weakness, there's nothing to be served, nothing to gain from coming out and saying it in the media. It's as bad as Sanderson talking about bloody tagging Brodie Smith, for Christ's sakes.
Question for the panel. I just in this the current climate of buys and rest before finals, Just wondering what your thoughts are as to what the ideal preparation is and whether that actually involves playing one match in 4 weeks when you run out to play a prelim final.
Well, I think I'd get rid of the bye, quite frankly, because I do think it's taken away a huge advantage that you earn over the course of 23 games or 22 games, 23 weeks. You earn the right to be either first or second and have that week's that advantage and have that week's rest if you win through. And to me, I just think that. But by the way they've got it now, I just think it's eliminated a lot of the advantage that 1 and 2 have.
But Fiend, what are your thoughts on one game in 4 weeks?
No, well, I think the problem is actually in the second rest. So we win tomorrow night, and all of a sudden it's 2 games in 4 weeks. And
one game. Sorry,
one game in 4 weeks. And whilst everyone benefits from the bye week that we've just had, I think the second bye then becomes counterproductive. So I don't like it personally. I never have liked it. I think it, like Macca says, I think it removes the advantage of finishing at the top end of the table, and it must be problematic for coaches and fitness staff that have to manage it, to be honest.
I mean, at the moment, we've only got a very small sample size, but last year, first year of the bye, and both teams that won the qualifying final went on and played one game in 4 weeks, went on to lose the prelim. Yep. So I'll be interested to see how this year pans out.
And it'll be very important, I think, in the arguments that will be presented to Gillan McLaughlin, of course, who's very biased towards because he put it in. And he made that point. There's only been 1 year to talk about. But, when good judges like Clarkson and a couple of other boys join in and come up and say and make the very comments that we're talking about, I think you've got to listen to them.
I think the counterpoint is that at least if you do get some niggles tomorrow night and you win, it gives you a bit more recovery time. So I guess from that perspective, there's an upside. So I suppose it depends on how much you're relying on momentum and how much you're relying on a fit squad, I suppose.
I mean, I know this is going to be very Adelaide supporter of me to look at it from this perspective, but we have a win, let's say, on Thursday. We certainly hope that we do, because you never want to barrack for a loss. So we have a win. We're straight into the prelim, and we've had one game in 4 weeks, and that will most likely pit us against a Sydney Swans outfit that has been on a roll since basically round 7, and would continue to be on a roll, having won 2 games to get to the prelim final. I don't know. That just concerns the hell out of me.
Well, that can work 2 ways, I suppose, as well, Pete, because, that's a lot of games to win on the trot, and they're going to have to win a game away in Adelaide, which, granted doesn't hold many fears for them, but it is a tougher gig than winning a game in Sydney, and they've got to do it basically to be their 19th win on the trot or whatever. That's a huge ask of a squad to be up for that long, and I'd probably even irrespective of what we've just been speaking about, I'd probably still rather be in Adelaide's shoes in that scenario than Sydney's.
The counter to that, of course, is if we don't have a win, we play a semi-final at home against either West Coast or Port. If we win that, we cross over to the MCG to play the winner of Richmond and Geelong.
Well, I reckon if we were to lose, and God forbid, I think we'd be playing West Coast. I think they're the best $2.75 bet I've seen for a long time.
Yeah, actually, that's probably a good entree, Macca, into the other games on the weekend. So seeing that you've opened up the betting there, let's have a quick chat about the other games. How do you see Port and West Coast? Obviously, Macca, your thoughts are clear.
Yeah, I reckon Porter they try very hard. They're not a greatly skilled side compared to a lot of the other sides. To me, they play some players that aren't of the same calibre as what the other teams have got. And that's been proven by the fact that they haven't beaten any of the genuine top 8 sides at all. I think they had a win against Melbourne. Is that right? But then Melbourne didn't make it, did they?
They had a win against Sydney when they were in their 0-6 phase.
Oh, right, okay. Well, then I knew there was one somewhere, but so remote I couldn't even think of it. And that's and they failed miserably against the other sides in the top 8. I just think that West Coast, and they handle this ground very well because the dimensions are very, very similar to Subiaco. It's narrow. Their web works well on it. I can actually see them beating Port Adelaide, and I'm actually going to have a little flutter on them at $2.75.
Well, West Coast is 0. Well, Port are 0-3 against West Coast at Adelaide Oval. I mean, at some stage, Port are going to win on their home ground. But if you look at that, up until this stage, it's like, well, come on.
I don't actually think that record means jack shit. And yet I'm still tipping West Coast because I think West Coast are just a better team, irrespective of their up and down form this year. And I think this weekend's loss to West Coast will show Port how much they've wasted this season. Because it has been a waste for them. They've been chasing wins, falling into the 8 and getting nothing out of it.
I'm with you, Phoenix. I think that's absolutely right.
And of course, according to the VFL media, there is only one game on this weekend, and that is the massive game at the MCG on Friday night between Richmond and Geelong. How do we see that one panning out?
Good game, though, isn't it? I'm actually a little bit confused in this game myself as to who will be the winner. All year I've thought that Richmond were pretenders, but they just kept on winning, and so they can't be pretenders. You can't keep on winning and be a pretender. So they obviously have some quality about them, although it's an unusual structure for a final type side, and to have perhaps only one tall forward and the rest of the guys are all little mosquitoes.
They got that young lad that's been kicking a few since he's been in. If they pick him again, what's his name?
Apologies, I forgot about him.
Townsend or whatever his name is.
Townsend, I think, is he the ex-GWS boy?
Yeah. I think Mark Williams loves him.
But he can play. So he's a handy addition to their side. So I'm half thinking that Richmond can do it. If they got within a couple of goals down at the slag heap and against Geelong, and I'm thinking that I think I will go Richmond. God forgive me.
Well, for me, the issue I've got is, they came within a couple of goals down there, but that was a Selwood-less Geelong, and Richmond shat themselves. They played horrendously. And it's just, I think there's going to be too much pressure on them, and because there was so much pressure on them leading into that game down at Geelong, and it's a similar kind of pressure this week. Now, if maybe they've learnt something from it, but I don't think they will. As much as I hate it, I think Geelong actually, just their experience playing in front of that big a crowd will likely get them over the line.
I actually think Richmond are going to pump Geelong. I think they're going to pump them.
I'd love it if it happens.
I wouldn't mind betting it's going to be a 10-goal win to the Tigers. I think everything's going for them. Martin re-signing, 70-odd thousand fans at the G. I reckon Geelong are probably overperforming. They're going to pick a half-lame Selwood. I don't think...
But that's when Richmond fall in a heap.
Yeah,
that's
they have done in the past. They have, but I don't think it's going to happen this year. I think Richmond are going to make a prelim final. I think they're going to pump Geelong.
I'm with you, mate. Toot, I'm on the TIG train, and I reckon that they will get across the line. And what the funniest thing about if Geelong lose that game is that they will run smack bang into the Sydney Swans, and because I don't think any of us would think that Essendon will get across Sydney up at the SCG. And if we can, so if we make that assumption, then it's a really, really important game for Richmond and Geelong, because nobody is going to want to have to back up the next week against the Swannies.
I actually think that Essendon present a big challenge for Sydney this week. They probably should have won their last time they played, Pete, if you remember. And their speed troubles Sydney, in my view. and on the SCG speed can get you goals quite quickly, one way or the other. So if Sydney are going to have a little slump, because, you could think maybe some mental fatigue given that they had to work so hard to make the finals, maybe this week presents a bit of a down week for them. I don't think they'll get done, but I reckon it might be a bit closer than people suspect.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Phoenix. And Essendon should definitely have won last time. The problem with Essendon is that they are a very, very attacking side, and they're a little bit unorthodox in some ways because they really run forward very, very hard, but they don't defend anywhere near as hard as they do attack, and that's where they actually lost the game in Sydney in the last 2 or 3 minutes. That they're just not used to defending, and most teams build from the back up and go forward. I think Essendon they're building from the forward line and going back, but that makes them very difficult to play.
Be very surprised if they get within 50 points of Sydney on Saturday. That's just my view. All right, let's look at the other finals. Nikki, do you want to have a quick look at the Cockwomble this week?
We can do that.
Underground, overground, wombling free.
I actually think my cat heard the cock crowing through the headphones. Well, I'm actually going to start with one we haven't mentioned yet tonight, but good old Brendan Favola, who proved that, he's just spent probably a little bit too long at Bali and not paid attention this year, in that he was asked, who has the best chances, etc., and they asked him about Adelaide, and he said, no, Adelaide can't win any finals because they can't win in Melbourne.
Yeah,
I did see that one.
Not the bloke that I would regard as the leading expert. I've got a nomination for the Cockwomble, Nikki, that hasn't been mentioned yet, and it's Chris Scott. It's Chris Scott. They were talking about Selwood's injury, and he'll be fine. Yes, I think he'll be fine. Blah blah blah, and for no reason he brought up Sloane, and he said, "I wouldn't think Sloane would play." And he said, "You can't inject an appendix," and I thought to myself, Is he for real? What's he going to do? Are we going to inject this appendix that's been removed from Sloane's body? The guy's a banana.
Okay.
I reckon that's Cockwomble worthy.
Fiend, got any nominations?
No, I quite like the Chris Scott one, actually. I'm sitting here chuckling.
That one is good.
I mean, Scorpus brings up Buckley for slagging off Maine. We've talked about that, but I think that's probably a worthy contender, or at least in the conversation.
And the other thing is just that whole thing on the All Australian Awards, when you had questioning Darcy about, Jacobs up against Ryder, did you take into account their head-to-head? He goes, oh, no, not because they only play each other once, except the fact that they actually play each other twice. You had them asking about why Selwood was in there, and you have Richo just going, oh, I just didn't feel right without him in the team. Well, if he hasn't played well enough, he shouldn't frickin' be in the team.
Stunning analysis, really, isn't it, when you think about it?
Oh, totally.
Stunning analysis.
The bit that really got me was the fact that you had those poor guys that would come on and have the shortest guy in a former AFL player putting jackets on them. Yeah, that didn't work. It's always so awkward. These boys don't know how to put on a jacket. And then they have to go and stand up on this little balcony thing and just stand there whilst people talk about them or why they're not good enough, etc. And then they only pick a couple of them to interview. These guys are in the All-Australian team. Don't you want to hear something from all of them?
I like Luke Darcy when talking about Joel Selwood, and he just said, well, I just couldn't imagine what an All-Australian team would look like without Joel Selwood in it. I mean, that's what he really said.
Yeah.
No, for me, it's the All-Australian, the whole thing, the presentation, the selection, the coverage, the whole lot.
Well, can we expand it to the media in general this week? Because between the coverage of the All-Australian, the absolute farce that was the Legends game,
That was horrible.
Quite frankly, I'm sick and tired, and I actually think it's counterproductive for Brayshaw and BT to be bagging blokes who are actually having a little bit of a go, because we as spectators actually want to see these blokes play football.
Yeah.
Not just run
Feel
around
mature.
and not try too hard and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I get it. We're not going to see any cracked skulls and dislocated shoulders, but you want an actual game of football if you're going to play. And Brayshaw and BT just sitting on the sidelines hanging shit on their mates didn't provide for a very good football spectacle. And then you've got the media ever since the weekend, basically, covering the first week of the finals in the National Australian Rules competition. And you would think that there were only 2 games being played, Richmond and Geelong, and Essendon playing someone. Because aside from that, there was just no coverage whatsoever. And I can understand it on a radio station like SEN, because they're a Victorian radio station with a Victorian audience. But even they were more balanced, or they have been more balanced this week in terms of their coverage and analysis than nationally broadcast shows. I just can't believe... And it's not a whine, it's just it's the ineptitude of national media organisations in covering a national sport.
Absolutely, I'm spot on there.
Yeah, you're spot on, mate. I think we've got a winner, and that is the, as I like to refer them to, as the VFL media. I think are the winners.
Yeah, look, I'm happy just to give Chris Scott the Village Idiot Award of the week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Here you go, and I'll just play that in the background.
that's nice. Fiend, do you want to take us through a little bit of advertising for our podcast as we come close to the to winding up tonight?
Close to the hour mark. Yeah, I'm watching.
I'm after last week. I'm all over it this week.
Yeah, now Scorpus is in the chat, and I don't know whether we're going to do a preview show tomorrow night. Scorpus, are we? I'll leave you to answer that while I run through the rest of the stuff. Don't forget, of course, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at AFL Crowcast. If you're listening to us on iTunes, you can leave us a review and a few stars. That'll be great. It helps our ranking. Don't forget that there won't be... Oh, God. Will there be? I don't know. Depends how many beers I've had as to whether there's a main break show at halftime. So we'll play that one by ear, so just keep an eye on your social media or on Big Footy. Scorpus has just told me there will be a preview show tomorrow night, so that'll be at 7:30 Adelaide time. And I think that's about all I've got.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks, mate. Thanks. Been a fantastic show tonight, ripping show. Thanks very much to Fiend, Macca and Nikki. Great to have your contributions as always. And we look forward to a massive game on Thursday night. We'll see how we go. Go the Crows. And we'll catch you again next Tuesday night for the AFL Crowcast.
Good night,
Take a
all.
rug,
See
it's
you
going to
guys.
be cold.
Yeah, see ya.